Welcome to the wonderful world of Bella Embroidery. There are so many embroidery needles on the market, it's very difficult to figure out which one is which, and especially as each needle is not printed with the number that it is. Ladies say to me, what number embroidery needle is this? And they'll show me one. But in all honesty, unless you have many lined up in a row and then you try and figure out the height and the width of it, it's an educated guess. What I do in my needle case is I try and keep each page of my needle case separate for each type of needle. So all my 7s are on page 1, or my 8s on page 2, and I try and name them, at least that way I know. Or the other thing is just keep them in the packet that you bought them in, and that will help you to remind you which needle is which. Unfortunately, the needles are not printed with the numbers on them, and most of the needles are so tiny you wouldn't know anyway. So, as I said, it is basically an educated guess as to which needle it is. The other thing is that there is always a wrong side and a right side to each needle, so that when you thread them, if you're not using a needle threader, sometimes you will find that you will not be able to thread it easily. If you turn the shaft around to the other direction, you will probably find that the thread will easily glide through the eye, because one is the right side and one is the wrong side. If you hold them up to the light very carefully, when you're looking at the eye of the needle, you'll see that one side is actually beveled more deeply than the other side, and that is the side to thread it from. But when all things are equal, just use a needle threader and it'll make life a lot easier. Once you find a brand of needle that you like, I prefer Peacemakers. They're made in Japan. For the American market, I find them to be of a superior quality, but I'm sure there are other good quality ones around as well. Just make sure you buy the best you can. You always get the best needle for the best dollar, so see how you go. Let me introduce you to some needles. These are the needles that we use in general embroidery for all the types that you'll need. Number 5, embroidery number 5. This is your largest of all hand embroidery needles. It is sharp and it has a fairly large eye. So children will often start off with an embroidery number 5 to do basic running stitch, blanket stitch, lazy daisy embroideries. So if you're a young one and they want to start to learn to embroider, give them a number 5. A number 7 is a general embroidery needle for most ladies who have got fairly poor eyesight. It has a fairly thick shaft and a large eye, suitable to take 3 strands of embroidery cotton. A number 8 embroidery is your finer one, so they go from the thickest shaft all the way down to number 10, which is your finest shaft. Your number 7 is if you've got fairly poor eyesight and you need a large eye. A number 8 has a fairly large eye again because it's a crewel embroidery needle. It will take 3 strands of cotton, but 2 more comfortably, and it has a finer shaft and a finer eye. A number 9 embroidery needle is something that I like to use because it's almost the finest, and it has a very sharp point, a fine needle. It's short in length and a small eye, and it takes a single thread of embroidery cotton very comfortably. A number 10 embroidery for crewel embroidery, definitely when you're only using 1 strand of embroidery cotton, it is the finest of all the needles, the sharpest, and it's got the finest of the shafts. The next needles we use in hand embroidery are generally a milliner's needle or a straw needle. These are the ones that we use when we're doing grub roses or bullion roses, and with Bella Embroidery Designs we've got lots and lots of beautiful roses to embroider. So my suggestion is that you buy some of these straw needles or a milliner's. The wonderful thing about these is that the shaft and the eye of the needle are all the same thickness, so that when you're doing the wrap around the needle, when you have to pull the needle through, the wraps do not get caught on the eye. So there's a 3 to a 9. The 3 is the finest and the 9s are the largest. The next one down are your beading needles. Now your beading needles are for stringing jewellery, beads, stringing and sewing beads onto fabric. They are very, very fine. You will need a needle threader to use these, and they're fairly bendy as well. So these are the finest ones for petite glass beads, any of the very, very petite, minute little beads. The beading needle, they're worth using. The next one down is a quilting needle or a betweens. This is a between number 12. Oftentimes people use the betweens too for tiny little beading, for sewing on tiny little beads in beading. The next one down is your applique or your sharp. A very, very fine needle with a very pointy end and a tiny eye, generally used for a single thread of regular sewing cotton, not for embroidery. This is for needle turn applique. The next one down are chenille needles. Now these are a fairly thick needle with a very large wide eye. Chenille embroidery needles are used for silk ribbon embroidery or for candle wicking. Because when you're using candle wicking, you use threads of number pearl 8 or pearl 5 or any type of crochet thread. You'll need a fairly large eye and a fairly large shaft to be able to puncture the fabric and not to destroy the fabric in any way. And that's a chenille. So basically, these are all the needles that you'll use when doing the Bella embroidery designs. Thank you.